Welcome to Fresh Thinking by Snowden Optiro. My name is Sarah De Vries, Principal Consultant at Snowden Optiro. Today we're discussing electrification in open pit haulage. Today I'm joined by Paul Lucey, who is a Director at Project 412. Paul has a wealth of experience in the open pit haulage electrification, autonomy and AI space, amongst many other future of mining topics. Thanks so much for joining us today, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Paul, there's a lot of news lately about battery electric ultraclass trucks for open pit haulage. What do you think about the technological readiness level of this technology and the timing of it?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's a very hard question to answer. So I think in terms of the vehicles that we're currently seeing, and if we look at probably the three leaders in that space being Caterpillar, Komatsu, and Liebherr via Fortescue, is the trucks are at a reasonably high TRL level, so they function all right, but they still have a long way to go in terms of competing with a diesel truck. And I think that's the challenge, is that these trucks are technically work, but in terms of the entire ecosystem that supports them and the battery technology that's associated with them, I think that's the challenge that the mining companies are facing currently.
So you're talking about power distribution and charging facilities in terms of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so it's one thing to run a battery electric truck, it's another thing to charge it. So if you have a battery electric truck, then you want to put renewable energy in, so you've got to get the renewable energy and then you've got to put it in. And when these things charge, they will charge at 2 or 3 times the capacity of the battery, which means you're seeing peaks on the system and then you can't charge them all at the same time. So then you have to manage your mining profile accordingly. So it requires a lot more supporting infrastructure, to the point that the supporting infrastructure and the renewable energy cost more than the whole truck. And I think that was the thing that caught everyone out.
So this is a big change from the typical drive your truck for a shift and then go and fill it up again and off you go. You know, not too much thought is required. I imagine we're going to have to do a lot more planning and management of battery charge levels and optimizing the usage of the charge stations.
Yeah, correct. I mean, diesel is very forgiving, but I think it's the flexibility that it brings. And I think when you look at charging and fast charging battery electric trucks, you can put a system in place that copes reasonably well. But to power up those diesel trucks, you need a 60,000 litre tank, and it's easy to put one in and you can fill it up whenever time you want. Getting renewable energy to work is just an amazingly complex process, because the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time, but you want to mine all the time. So these are the complexities that you face.
So how's the battery technology going then in terms of, I know in WA in particular, we generally have wind at night and sun during the day, and we have down periods at dusk and dawn for a couple of hours. Is the battery technology available to cover that 3-4 hour gap at the moment, or are we still limited to about the 1 hour gap?
So battery technology is improving significantly year on year, which is good. And there's been a lot of debate of which battery you put in a truck and which battery you put on the grid, and they're not necessarily the same battery. And there's discussions around using the batteries from haul trucks to grid support going forward, and that kind of makes sense in some situations. There are some battery electric trucks that run the LTO battery, low density, long life, very, very expensive. And at the end of the scale, you have NMC, high density, lower life, that is providing challenges within mining in terms of its life. And then in between, you have the various LFP variations that occur. So no one's quite sure which one's going to stack up at this particular point in time.
So do you think that traditional trolley assist or newer dynamic charging technology that's being developed at the moment has a role to play in direct propulsion of trucks and battery charging?
So I've done plenty of studies on trolley, and to be honest, I've never had one stack up, which is the reason why there's not many around the world.
You're putting me out of a job, Paul.
But however, the new dynamic charging systems that are out there, so Blue Vein and Caterpillar's DET system. Again, I've done some studies now conceptually, because the details in these things are pretty scarce. But they are supportive of an ecosystem. So you wouldn't put one in completely without charging, but they definitely support a charging infrastructure, and they would definitely reduces some of the infrastructure required in terms of supporting battery electric trucks. So I do see that they play quite an integral process in what's going to happen going forward.
And the advantages of those new systems are they are not as fixed. They're a lot more flexible and movable than traditional trolley, is my understanding.
That's correct. So the idea behind them is that they're installed for short periods of time, and they are relocatable in their entirety, where the traditional trolley system, you design to put it in and preferably not move it, although you can move it, but then you have to restring them, and the process is far more complex.
Time consuming,
yeah.
So moving slightly away from BV and into hybrids. So diesel electric trucks have been around for a long time. I'm hearing a lot of talk now about hybrids being developed. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I did spend a fair bit of time on this, actually, a couple of years looking at hybrids. Look, I believe hybrids are a valuable solution going forward. There's 50-odd thousand haul trucks in the world. They have an average life of around 20 years. So they're going to be around long after the electrification process takes forward. So having something that allows you to retrofit them as a diesel battery electric makes a lot of sense. I think one of the reasons why the OEMs did not go down the hybrid route is because a lot of the major mining companies said, no, we want to go straight to battery, and that's the technology that we choose. Now, if you had your time again, I'm pretty sure everyone would go a different route, but it is what it is. So the hybrid market is challenging at the moment because it is very expensive to do a retrofit. And again, that is the price of the battery. As the price of the battery drops, then you'll find that hybrids are likely to have an uptake within the market.
Okay. So all of these technologies seem to be in trial, prototype, limited site trials at the moment. What do you think is the time frame we're looking at for either hybrid or BEV implementation on any sort of reasonable scale?
I always say 2027, and the reason I say 2027 is for two reasons. One is that putting something in 2027 allows you to start to iron out the problems before 2030 when the legislation kicks in, where you do need to have a working solution. It also allows the technology to catch up in the next couple of years, particularly around how you're going to support the trucks. So it's one thing to buy the trucks, it's another thing to power the trucks. And I think at one stage people were concerned about getting the trucks. They're now concerned about how they're going to power the trucks. So I think it's going to be a very soft take up in around 2027, and then steeply increase towards 2030.
I guess an open pit is generally quite different to an underground mine that usually has a fairly well-established power distribution network. A lot of our mines open pit mines in Australia don't really have a backbone of power distribution. So yeah, it is a big call to have to put all of that power distribution in to support this new technology.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think underground is years ahead. I mean, when we did the electric mine consortium, which was heavily focused on underground, that they were trialing bits of equipment, and you can actually buy that and go and put it in, and companies are physically doing that today. The challenge you've got with open pits is that there isn't the electrical infrastructure that's there, and it's a huge amount of power. It's quite significantly higher than what you would see underground. And I mean, if you haven't started your journey today in terms of understanding how to electrify your mine to put electric haul truck in, you're not likely to do that before 2030.
Is there anything that mining companies can do straight away to reduce their diesel consumption?
Yeah, so interestingly, that was a focus of why I went back to 412 is in all the various studies that I did, we found there is much benefit in making the equipment smarter as there is in terms of putting a battery in a truck for a hybrid solution. So that's going to be the low-hanging fruit because it's cheaper than doing physical changes to your truck. Mentally, it's quite hard for mining companies to get their head around that because you have to change the way that the operation works, but you're going to have to do that if you do battery electric trucks. So I think that's the first order stuff that I would suggest to companies to do today, followed by hybridization.
So you're talking about things like better fleet management systems, driver behavior, that sort of...
That's correct. Yeah, so even to the point of putting like an AI in your truck will make that truck perform far more efficiently, between 7 to 15% more efficiently.
And that's not insignificant.
No, it makes a difference.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. You've obviously got a huge amount of knowledge in this field, and hopefully we can continue chatting further another time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Paul. If you'd like to listen to more of our Fresh Thinking by Snowden Optiro podcasts, you'll find them for free on our website, Spotify, and most other podcast platforms. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep you up to date on our technical podcasts. Thanks for watching.